All right, today we got a special guest. We got Ceasar Espinosa from FIEL, and I was just wondering if you can introduce yourself on who you are.
So my name is Ceasar Espinosa, and I'm executive director of FIEL, and I've been an advocate for the community for the last over now 22 years. Since I was 15 years old, I'm 37 now, and started working with different organizations, Central Americans, South Americans, and then eventually in 2007 we started an organization to advocate at the beginning just for young undocumented people. And then over the last 15 years, we've grown to work on policy for the Latino community at large, on all the local, the state, and at the federal level, working on everything from disaster recovery to healthcare to housing, and obviously continuing to work with the immigration issue.
Okay, thank you. Just for people that don't know, you started doing this before DACA was even a thing, like before Obama passed the executive order to do DACA. Can you talk a little bit about how it was before the executive order?
So let's go way back to 2001. I was a sophomore in high school. My sister had graduated from high school, and she was looking for. We were both undocumented, and she was looking to go to college, just because she wanted a better life for herself. And so at that time, students were not allowed to, or they were allowed to go to school, but we would have to pay international tuition. So we began work and advocating at the Texas level, and we were able to pass the first law in the United States that would grant in-state tuition and financial aid to undocumented students if they completed certain requirements here in the state of Texas. After Texas, 15 other states passed it. So we were the prime example of what could be done to benefit the rest of the country. And yes.
Oh, well, I'm just a little confused. That was under Rick Perry.
That was still under Rick Perry.
When Greg Abbott came in, did he take that away?
No, that's still a law that exists in the books today. Every 2 years they try to take that away, but we've been able to keep it afloat because at the end of the day it benefits Texas. It benefits if you have a kid who has done all the right things and they want to go to college and they want to better their families, why not allow them that opportunity? You're not taking anything from anybody else. You're just leveling the playing field. So fast forward 3 years, the law is in the books. I'm a senior at the Bakey High School for Health Professions, and I get a high test score on my SATs. I'm geared up to go to college, but then what happens at 18 years old? I get so many doors shut in my face because I'm still undocumented, and a lot of the universities won't take me. But if they'll take me, then I'll be charged out of state, out of country, international tuition, which was unaffordable for me and my family. So it became a point of frustration. But out of frustration, you get opportunity. And so at that time, we began to advocate for better policies, for scholarships and financially for more undocumented students. And fast forward now, and at the same time also, it providing a pathway to residency or citizenship for undocumented students, and that came in the form of a piece of legislation called the DREAM Act. And so we began to advocate. We began a local, state, and national movement for the DREAM Act. We got it passed in Congress in 2010 for the first time in its inception. We got it passed through Congress. But when we went to the Senate, we missed the vote by 5 votes. And a lot of people say, well, it's because the Republicans didn't support it, it's because the Democrats didn't support it. And it's important to point out that at that time, the Republicans did make it harder for the bill to pass because we needed a supermajority of 60 or more senators. But 5 Democrats voted against the DREAM Act in 2010. So when people want to make this political about, oh, this party is on our side or that party is against us, at the end of the day, it's a whole system that continues to push people back and continues to deny immigrants, especially young immigrants, the opportunities to fully integrate into U.S. society. So fast forward 2 more years, in 2012, under President Obama, they announced DACA, and it was a life-changing moment for about 850,000 students, 850,000 young people around the country who were able to benefit from having a work permit for 2 years. And the results are night and day. I mean, the studies have shown that DACA recipients go to school at a higher rate. They come back to their communities because they're rooted in with their parents, with their families, and they have provided a large economic boost into their communities.
Okay. It's a blessing to be our age because we're in our mid-30s. And we know what it was like before DACA and after DACA. Just to personalize this a little bit because it's such an important issue. And, you know, I have friends that were undocumented, and I know they grew up with a lot of fear. Just driving in a neighborhood could cause a lot of fear. Could you speak a little bit about that? Like what it was like to grow up undocumented?
So I was just talking to a friend of mine earlier this morning, and I was telling her that we grew up with unsolicited fears and unsolicited uncertainties as children of immigrants. First of all, when growing up, when I was little, there was a conversation at a very young age, probably when I was 7 or 8 years old, of what happens if you come home one day and your parents are not there. There was a little notebook that my mom would keep that had the updated numbers of my grandparents, of some uncles that we had here in the U.S., to ask for help if one day our parents disappeared. And when we were asked why, because I was always that one kid that asked questions when I asked why, and they explained it to me as to what our immigration status was. And I was lucky that was done to me because there's kids that we meet every single day almost that they never knew that their parents were undocumented, that they didn't know they were undocumented. And so sometimes they find out that they're undocumented here at our office. Because they ask, what am I doing here? Okay, well, we're getting you a work permit because you're not a U.S. citizen. So all of that growing up, all of that, it does cause a lot of PTSD. A lot of folks. I now have DACA. I have a driver's license, but every single time that a cop pulls up behind me, I'm like, what did I do wrong? Am I gonna get put over? And then I have to remind myself, you have insurance, you have all of this. But then on top of that, I'm a brown Latino man. And so as much as people don't want to accept or acknowledge the fact that we don't live in a post-racial society, then things are going to continue to pass by. And I don't only mean that in my personal experience, but we work with people who do get beat up by the police, who do get things happen. And even though there's a lot of good cops out there, there's also many bad cops out there who use the color of law to be able to do a lot of unspeakable things to people.
And I definitely will get back to what you just said about the police brutality later on, because I know, unfortunately a couple years ago, here in the Houston area, was a big story about John Hernandez getting killed, and you were with the family and you fought with the family for that. And I will ask you that in a little bit, but also, now that you mentioned that and you let the audience know what it was like, I definitely want to talk about one of the reasons why me and you started communicating, and it was Hispanic people pretty much that, maybe they were born here and they don't understand the struggle, and now they're like constantly dissing or telling us to go back. In particular, Chingo Bling, who, I'm going to set the context. He was a Hispanic rapper, Chicano rapper from Houston. He claimed to be from Matamoros. He used to do a lot of parody songs. He did a couple hip-hop albums. And yeah, at one point, he was the biggest Hispanic rapper in the city, probably the whole state. And, he fought for the Dreamers. He fought, his albums was Can't Deport Us All. So it was definitely very uplifting. I know a lot of Hispanic kids that grew up undocumented, they really hung on to the whole Chingo Bling. Maybe they were bullied in school, and I guess his music made them feel better about their legal situation. And then, 2020 happens, he gets on YouTube, and he pretty much says he's voting for Trump. Then he doubles down, he starts making a lot of videos, talking about send them back, and just pushing a whole negative pretty much, how do I say it? Just a whole negative message about us, which is the same people, but because somebody might not have papers, he thinks they should go back, and because he did it the right way, quote unquote, he gets to stay. I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, so first of all, I'm glad this is a 24-hour long video. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, y'all stick to the end. This is gonna be good. But I think that because there's a lot to unpack. I mean, and it's not only with Chingo. It's with Chingo Bling. It's with people who follow that narrative. One of the things I'll start off by saying is that a lot of these people are very superficial. Like they want to regurgitate talking points that they hear either on podcasts or on other YouTube or at church or things like that, concepts that they hear. But when you ask them to dive deep into like critical race theory, or to dive deep into like slavery in the United States and the history of it, or to dive deep into like the economic factors, push-pull factors that make people come here, or the U.S. interventions in other countries that are push and pull factors, they will just either insult you, or they will throw another conspiracy theory of something, or try to change the subject or call you or try to gaslight you into thinking that, oh, this person is crazy, he's one of the woke people, and it's not about that. It's about having one of the things, and one of my personal theories is that there's two types of people in this world now, and this is the way I look at my world now. There's people that want to do good by others by explaining and nourishing and teaching and sharing all that we've learned, so that the next generation won't have to go through the same things that we went through. And then there's the people that, even though they say they don't want government control, at the end of the day, they're the ones that are driving more laws, more policies for there to be more controls on people, like on abortion, on gay rights, on immigration, on many other things. And so I think that's where we should start off from. It's like offering, if people are really wanting to stick by their guns, is offering not just blurbs or not just things on TikTok that'll make you go viral, but having deep community conversations about what is really, really going on. The other thing that it's important and that we talk to young people about all the time is to not forget where they came from, because that is so important in order to know, for us to know where we are going. And to be proud of that. Our parents did so much for us. Our parents continue to do so much for us. Being bilingual is not a bad thing. It's an amazing, wonderful thing. Being an immigrant is not a bad thing. It's an amazing and wonderful thing. But if you look at a lot of the mainstream concepts that these folks are going after, they make you feel like that is the worst thing in the world, when in reality it's so amazing. In Europe, it's not uncommon for a toddler, for a 5-6-year-old, to already speak 3 or 4 different languages, and you're not taking anything away from that kid, but rather you're giving them tools so that they can go to other parts of the world and continue to make a difference and continue to make change. Lastly, I think it's important that we speak with responsibility. Oftentimes, people in the conspiracy theory will drive all these narratives, will drive all these concepts, and there's people out there that actually do listen and internalize that. And then you have things like what happened in Buffalo, New York happen. You have things like what happened in El Paso happen, or you have people that are gonna feed into your conspiracy theories, because that, and then create their own persona or their own identity, and then will act upon it. So I do think that recently we just saw some statistics from the FBI, and I invite people to really look these up themselves, and you can see in 2020 the incidence of hate crimes and violent crimes against minorities or underserved communities spikes because of the rhetoric that Donald Trump promoted. And so these, people say, well, it's free speech, but as Abraham Lincoln says, your ability to swing your arm stops where my nose starts, and that's where a lot of people are missing the mark.
Okay, so yeah, I have been going back and forth for a couple years now, you and him, and basically, I think you already answered it, but I think I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more on what the biggest problem that you have with what he said is, like a lot of the things that he said.
Well, the biggest problem I think is that he continues to promote the concept of and he's internalized the concept of using a community for his own personal gain, and then turning their backs on that same community. And this has been, unfortunately, the history of the United States when it comes to slavery, when it comes to immigration, the Bracero program. There's the Chinese Exclusion Act. You name it. So this country has a long-standing history of using communities and then abusing them and then turning their backs on them once they get what they want. Chingo Bling has internalized this massively. He has built a career on the backs of Latinos and immigrants and our sayings, the tururu, all of that. He has built his career on the backs of the same people he's now looking to oppress, the same people that he's looking now to shame, the same people that he's looking now to send back to a place that used to be theirs, or from a place that used to be theirs, historically speaking. But we don't talk about that. He doesn't talk about that. He goes and he regurgitates a lot of what he hears, and passes it on as if it were fact, when it's in fact not fact, but his opinion. So the biggest problem that I have with him is that he even now, even till today, he still uses the imagery of the Latino, of the immigrant, of the sombrero, of this, of the boots, and uses it to bastardize and sell our culture, while at the same time trying to knock us down. So I mean, it's incredible what he has done, but it's also very telling that at one point he was the top artist, maybe the top rapper in Texas representing Latinos, and now he's almost unheard of.
Okay. Do you think there's anything he can do to, I guess, redeem himself from all the negative stuff that he's been saying?
I think that people can always redeem themselves if they learn, if they take the time to deep dive, and there's always room for growth. There's always room for. I've talked to staunch Trump supporters that when they actually meet an immigrant and they ask regular questions of like, what's your everyday like? Where do your kids go to school? They're like, whoa, I was wrong. And I think that there's an opportunity for him to do that. Whether he's going to take that opportunity, I'm not sure, because I don't know how far down the rabbit hole he's gone. But at the same time, there's danger in that, and that there's still young people, there's still people that follow him, that or there's people that may not know that he has this new agenda now, and continue to support his work and continue to support him, thinking that he's on our side, thinking that he's on the side of Latinos seeking liberation here in the United States.
Okay. I'm going to segue into a similar topic, but kind of the same thing. In the last election, a lot of Hispanics did switch over to the Republican Party. And I just want to know what your thoughts about that is.
I think that, so first of all, it's important to point out that, and important to remind everybody, that Latinos are neither Democrat or Republicans. There is a perception that Latinos will vote more democratically and not fall into the Republican side. But for all those people that make that assumption, I invite them to go, to church. I invite them to go to places where Latinos congregate. And what we realize is that our older generations are more fiscally conservative, are more conservative on social issues and things like that. Now, the new generations that are coming up here in the U.S. tend to be a lot more left-leaning. But anybody who makes the assumptions that Latinos are either this or that is totally missing the mark. The Latino community is growing at such a large rate, and we are changing dramatically as time goes on, that right now it really is up for grabs for any party that wants to really invest and really drive our agenda as a community. But but to say that we're all this or that or monolithic, it's almost laughable or an insult. I mean, you talk to so many people You figure out like different political ideologies coming even from country. It varies. Even from within Mexico, there people from the north tend to be more Americanized. People from the south tend to be more left, etc., etc. And it's really incredible. So I think instead of generalizing, we really have to listen to people, and we really have to tune into what people's needs. Now, I can tell you that here we face a lot of the same issues: access to healthcare, access to homes, access to housing, access to quality education. Because here they do group us together. But if you go deep down into each community, you'll find out that their political ideologies are way different. And that is a fascinating thing. But it's also an opportunity for all parties to really see how they can cater to our community, because it is going to be their lifeline for them to be able to have support for the future.
And I'm glad you said that about the communities being different. I come from the southeast side of Houston, and I think it feels like the majority of the men my age tend to go Republican. And I think a lot of that has to do with they work in the refineries, they work in oil and gas, they're around pretty much like this racist rhetoric a lot, or maybe they want to fit in with some of their coworkers. So a lot of them have kind of gone with this kind of like with this more conservative Republican, Proud Boys kind of mentality. Do you think that the Democratic Party is just not reaching out to men that are Hispanic?
I think that they are, but I think also it's like the sayings that our mom used to tell us all the time. Dime con quién andas y te diré quién eres. Like, if you're around these concepts all the time and you don't give yourself the opportunity to go out and beyond and look even within yourself or out of yourself in order to gain those perspectives, then you're only gonna hear and regurgitate what you're hearing around you. One of the things, and I'm different because I grew up here in Southwest Houston, and one of the things that I'm very grateful about that is that we can walk outside we can walk in this same building around, and you're gonna find Chinese, Vietnamese, Koreans, you're gonna find Latinos, you're gonna find Salvadoreños, Guatemaltecos, you're gonna find like there's a place downstairs that's run by Caucasians, and we're all just together and having the privilege to be around people from different walks of life, from different avenues of life, then you get to see, and it gives you a deeper perspective that yes, we are not all the same, but also we are not all going to be built under the same principle. One of the things that was there's maybe about 10 moments in my organizing life that have changed me as an organizer and me as a person. And one of the instances was after Harvey. We were walking around the apartments here, and there's a large Muslim community, and we knocked on the at this particular apartment complex, the water had reached the second floor, and we were door knocking, and when everybody, this pure devastation, and we knock on this door, and a man comes out, and he's Muslim, he's from Syria. He comes out. And we're like, do you need help? I mean, like, we're here to help. What can we do for you? Can we take you to a shelter? Can we bring you food? And he says, no, I'm okay. Thank you. I'm okay. And then I said, no, like, I mean, but you're not. He had 3 kids in the apartment with his wife. And we're like, well, can we bring you something? Do you need to talk to the management? What do you need to do? He's like, no, I'm okay. We're okay. And I, for the life of me, I said, well, you're not okay. Like, you are, and he's like, okay, I need you to understand something. Like, we're gonna come back from this. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, you are, but I want to make it easier for you. He's like, and I appreciate it, but to put things in context, we didn't get bombed last night. There's a little bit of water. Our stuff is wet, but my children and me are here because we didn't get bombed last night. So a little bit of water, it's okay. Yeah. Bombs, not okay. And that shows you the gauge of people, right? Because here I was thinking I was doing a good thing, but at the end of the day, it was unsolicited help. Being this man has been used to doing everything and recovering from even worse disasters, right? So when people are privileged and they don't and they have the privilege of having those jobs, and then they're in a different socioeconomic bracket, then it's very easy for them to turn around and to say, oh, those people. And that is one of the poison pills in our community, that once we hit a certain point, we always grew up with the cuida tu familia and forget about everything else, take care of your family and forget about everybody else, where in other communities they don't think of themselves as individuals, but they think of themselves as conglomerates. And so when somebody makes it out of the hood, they'll want to bring the rest of the hood with them, because it's not about them, but it's about all of us. And that's where a lot of the times Latinos miss the mark, in where we become successful, but then we are gatekeepers to each other's, because we've been acculturated to be that way, to survive. Now, in my personal life, I mentor kids, I mentor people. I always tell people, if there's a person that you want to talk to that I know, the mayor or a city council member, I will get you in front of them. And that is my promise and commitment to them, because if they succeed, we succeed, and I succeed, and we all succeed.
Okay, I'm very glad you touched on that. Recently, last year, Mayra Flores, she got a national notoriety, first Mexican-born woman in Congress. She lost her election. She's no longer in Congress. But, she was definitely, like you said, the gatekeepers. What's your thoughts on Mayra Flores?
So Mayra Flores, I commend her, and I want this to be on record. I commend her for reaching out and continuing to engage the Latino electorate. Where she missed the mark, though, was that she started, same thing, she took it too far by introducing these narratives and these talking points of like, these people are against us, these people are against us, these people are against us. And it showed in her re-election, when people actually paid attention and went down and canvassed the community, that she was not speaking for everybody, and that she was not, it was a fluke in a way, where she really galvanized her people. Her people that would follow her ideology, and they got her into Congress. But now they are not. When real community members came out, when real folks came out and voted, who were worried about where the state was going or where their district was going, then we saw different results, and that is a real thing. What worries me about her is that she still has a large megaphone. So she's still, every single day is something. Instead of rallying for her community, she just goes on her Twitter and on her social media channels and basically, throw shade at the current government or at the current administration, where instead she should be doing more to help out her community. The other thing that behooves me is that if you go right now into her Twitter, she says she's the first Latina congressional person from her district, and even though that is true, she should put that she's an ex-congressperson, not a congressperson, not a first elected. So she's, in a way, I feel that she's trying to impersonate or to make it seem like she's still in office when she's not. And so I think that's really interesting, but it is also a call to action and a call to attention to the Democratic Party that if they don't invest more money into getting into the community and talking to voters, then we're going to see a lot of Mayra Flores around the country.
I follow many activists like you on Instagram. There's two that I see are very popular. If you don't follow them, definitely you should follow them. Flowers in Spanish. She's from California.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is Brownish. She's another one. I think she's from Sacramento, California. Both of them from the Central Valley of California, that's been a hotbed for, Hispanic immigrants. Recently, Flowers in Spanish posted, she did a post criticizing Biden, saying, hey, where's your immigration reform? I want to get your thoughts on Biden and what you think about how he's been doing.
So let's take it back. Let's take it way back into 1994, and a lot of the times, let's be real for a moment. A lot of the times, we will hear from Republicans or the Republicans that are on your side because we pushed the Reagan amnesty and this and that. When in fact the Reagan amnesty was not only a political move, but it was also an economic push that benefited the U.S. immensely. You fast forward a couple of years, in 1994, a Democratic president by the name of Bill Clinton passed some of the most. We're good?
Yeah, we're good. We're recording.
Okay.
Okay.
You fast forward into 1994, and a Democratic president by the name of Bill Clinton passes some of the most restrictive immigration policies known as the IRA bars, which basically ban people from being here undocumented and then petitioning for their relatives here in the U.S. Fast forward a few more years, you have 9/11. President Bush pushes this narrative against Muslims and things like that. So that's very bad. Not only for, because that's the other caution that a lot of times people think as immigrants only as Mexican people, particularly, when they don't realize there's people from Venezuela and Nicaragua and everywhere, and then Vietnam yeah. and China and Africa and Europe, etc., etc. So he pushes for a lot of restrictive, and then he creates the Department of Homeland Security, and under him he creates ICE, which is Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, which basically is a paramilitary group that grows within the government to specifically go out and capture and deport undocumented people. Fast forward to the Obama administration. Obama was the deporter in chief for a long time. He deported so many people, trying to appease the Republicans by saying, if I do this, will you give me an immigration form? And when they had control of presidency, the House and the Senate, they still failed to deliver on immigration. Then you fast forward to Trump, who takes it a step further, not only continues to deport people, and he would have surpassed Obama if he would have served a second term, but he also goes with this notion of build the wall, that is a money pit, that's so it's incredible how he was able to appease. And if you look at the Trump presidency, every time that he did something negative to himself or that he had negative publicity, he would always go back to the immigration issue, because that's what gets his base rattled up. People are so anti-immigrant and racist that's what got them moving. He loses the presidency, and now we're under President Biden. Biden promised within the first 100 days of president that he was going to push for an immigration reform, and that still hasn't happened. All to say is that both parties that are in power, that have been in power for the longevity of this country, have failed to deliver a real economic and a humanitarian immigration reform to the immigrant community. And at the same time, they are continuing to use our people to build roads, houses, everything, to continue to be a vital part of this economy. And we're not even talking about how immigrants kept the country moving during COVID, but we did.
Yeah. And
how they have used us, and now they're looking to discard us and continue that process. And the only way to tie that back in is that same thing. This country has shown a cyclical sickness of slavery and enslaving people in order to continue to grow economically and societally. I invite people. This is not I'm not getting paid by this, but there's a book called The Warmth of Other Suns. Every Latino person should read this book, because it talks about a great migration from the south to the north, for economic opportunities, for safety, and for schools. For better futures for their children. And it talks about these things, but not from immigrants from Central and South America, but from African Americans from the south to the north. And people miss that mark too. People think that our communities are should be like this, or we are like this, but in reality we have more in common than what we realize. And there's a lot of power, and if we were to help each other, rather than continuing to fight and be against each other.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because definitely I feel the same way. Both communities, we've been working together. George Floyd, when that happened, our community stood alongside with the African American community. When Vanessa Guillen got killed, they also stood with us. So definitely, I'm glad you did mention that.
If we can talk just a little bit more about that, I think it's important for us Latinos to realize, for example, HISD. Like I just talked, there was a group of kids at HISD about 2 months ago that I was talking to, and I was telling them, I was explaining to them that their ability to be at the HISD building, sitting in those seats, was fought for by the black community during desegregation. If they hadn't done that fight, those new immigrant Latino kids would not be able to sit in those seats. So it's not to say that we owe anybody anything, but we must recognize that there's been people who have fought for liberation of colored people, no matter if you're black, if you're brown, if it's whatever you are. And the importance now is for us to see that, to acknowledge it, and to continue to build upon it. Because if you were to combine Latinos and black people in the city of Houston, we would make up more than 80% of the population. And it's incredible to know that, but know that at the same time that we're fighting against each other, we're pinning each other down, and we don't realize that we have the majority superpower here in the city of Houston.
Oh man, I'm glad you said that because there definitely is, like here in Houston, the communities are more together for the most part. But I know in other communities, there are a lot of Hispanics that are racist. Like that has come up a lot. There, George Floyd, you saw the guy with the chainsaw in Brownsville.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate that, a lot of people in our community choose to oppress others when, I'm not saying that we're oppressed, but I'm saying that the world hasn't really been as fair to us as it might have been to other people, pretty much.
Which is why the importance of learning the concepts of like critical race theory are so important. And people are going to argue or may argue against it, may be controversial, but at the end of the day, when you fully understand and internalize these concepts, you realize that there's systems of oppression that are built to favor white supremacy. And that's a real thing. And there's nobody that's going to change my mind on that, because studies have been done. There's so much that has been done to know that that's a fact.
Well, I think we should definitely explain critical race theory. Because critical race theory, can you explain to the people? Because they hear it and then they hear DeSantis.
Yes.
Misinform a lot of people.
So I'll say what critical theory is not.
Okay.
First, and then I'll explain what my understanding of critical race theory is. What critical race theory is not a racist concept. It's not us badgering Caucasian people or white people. Because you said it yourself earlier, Latinos and African Americans can also be white supremacists. Let me say that louder for the people in the back. Latinos and African Americans can also be white supremacists and follow white supremacist ideologies, right?
Like the colorism.
Like the colorism and things of that nature. The other thing is that it's not fake. It is very, very real. If we look back at the lynchings and all the things that happened here in the United States, not even prior to segregation, but since slavery, since the inception of slavery, you realize that things are, it's unfathomable what we can do to each other. Another moment that changed that messed with me for so long was during slavery, people would use black babies, to hunt crocodiles, and there's paintings of these things happening, and those things have to be spoken about, because otherwise we just blow them off as it didn't never happen, or we weren't that bad. And then if we talk about inherited traumas and inherited fears and PTSD, it is deeply rooted in what America has done to people of color. The what is also is not, it's not something to be ashamed of. When you own your own truth, when you own your own, it's one of the most honorable things that you can do, when you own up to what you did and when you try to be better. What is it? Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you learn to do better, and then do better. So if you're anti-black because that's all you heard from your parents, because that's another truth, that sometimes our relatives, our family members have also heard those notions from the tios and the compadres and the friends and the comadres and at work. Yeah. And sometimes we hear that we should be afraid or that people in the black community are this or that. If that's all we hear, then we have those biases too, right? But if you just stick with them and you don't try to actually get to know other communities and get to break bread with them and work with them, you're not giving yourself that opportunity to learn for yourself. And then if you are better, then you can do better by being an ally or continuing to advocate for the liberation of all people of whatever color you are. That's what it is not. It is not a racist, biased term. What it is a liberation of thought, knowing and accepting that skin color, unfortunately, plays a huge role, not only in the U.S., but across the world. Now, that's what it is. What it also is a sad truth that people have suffered immensely because of the color of their skin. And what it is, it's a vital and important part for us to teach in schools, for us to teach to little kids, so that we don't inherit the same biases that were inherited to us, and for them to accept. And studies have shown time and time again, if we rid ourselves of color nominations, or and we learn our history, then kids grow up to be one. And I have so much hope in that these generations that are coming up are starting to just get along and realize that at the end of the day we're all human beings. And I see that in my nieces and my nephews when I ask them what in your classroom, where the kids from. They're all like, well, they're from Texas. Like they don't understand. Sometimes it's hard for them to dive deep and segregate people like we used to do growing up.
Can I ask you a question? All right, what school did you go to? What middle school did you go to?
So I actually just had an aha moment the other day, and because I ended up, so I grew up in Montrose. When I got here to Houston, we ended up in Montrose, but it wasn't the Montrose that it is today. Yeah. It was a dangerous drive-by Montrose in the early 90s. And then we were there for 2 years, then we moved a year to Ohio. We came back, and then we ended up here in the Gulfton area.
Did you go to Houston? School here in Houston or Texas in the 7th grade?
I went to Wharton, and then I went to Cunningham Elementary, and then I went to Jane Long Middle School, which is here in Southwest Houston.
Because here in the 4th and in the 7th grade, you learned Texas history.
Yes.
Did you have Texas history?
I did have Texas history.
Okay, when they taught the Texas Revolution, because everybody makes a big deal about, critical race theory. Texas Revolution, the Texians, which are the white Texans that owned slaves, they wanted to keep their slaves. Mexico, under the Constitution, outlawed slavery. Most people don't know Vicente Guerrero, the second president of Mexico, was black. He was black and indigenous. So a lot of people don't know that. Like me, when I went to school, the Mexicans were trying to oppress the Texans, and the Texans come and take it. Did you grow up hearing that? Come and take it, Mexico. It's pretty much 7th grade was pretty much bashing Mexico. That's what you learn in history.
Yes,
did you feel that way?
It was the same way, and I was in the Vanguard program here at Jane Long Middle School, and it was the same curriculum taught, whether you were in GT or whether it was just it was that, and so now I go to places like the Alamo, and I see what's written on the walls and what the history, the way it's written, and then it behooves me that those theories are still being promulgated today.
Yeah, they're romanticized.
They're romanticized, and for an own political and own economical gain. For the state of Texas and for the powers that be. When I was and the reason why I was going to the middle school is because even though I went to Jane Long Middle School here, I recently went back and spoke at the school that I was zoned to, which is Welch Middle School, which is in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I had an aha moment in the sense that I grew up down the street from Welch. So I once again, it goes back to my upbringing. I was an undocumented person living in a black neighborhood, going to a GT school in a Latino neighborhood where there was Muslims, Chinese, Vietnamese, Indian folks, because it was a magnet school. And then after that, continuing to live in a black neighborhood, and then going to the medical center to study at one of the most prestigious high schools in HIZ, which is DeBakey High School. So I think I had a privilege of and that's what shaped me, and interacting with all these folks and not going by what I had heard.
Yeah, definitely.
But seeing people and getting to know people for who they are. And having black friends and Asian friends and Latino friends and you name it. And so I think that's my hope for Houston. That is my hope for the future. And that people don't just go by what they hear, and that they're not lazy to not go out and find out for themselves. And I invite people like, come to Southwest Houston, go to any of these restaurants, and you're going to realize that, yes, tacos and tortas and tostada, all of that is beautiful, and it's great. I eat them all the time. Yeah. But so is curry, and so is Vijani rice, so is Persian food. I mean, you name it. And you are not doing yourself a favor by depriving yourself of that.
Okay, very good. Have you gone to the San Jacinto Monument?
I have gone to the San Jacinto Monument.
Do you ever get mixed feelings when you go there?
Every time I go to a monument, and let's first talk about the monolith, the pointing things.
Yeah.
People don't know that those are signs of conquistadores. Like, that was the building those monuments was saying, we were here, we took it over, and it shows. And the reason why they're made out of the material that they're made of is to show power and to show, now we came and took it over. There's one there. There's another one, a smaller one at Herman Park, where it was like where people landed, et cetera, et cetera. And every time I go to a monument like that, there's one in Washington, D.C., and it always brings back mixed feelings, because you let's not talk about Latinos, let's talk about indigenous people. Like, these lands were stolen and were conquered and taken away from people who had been here for millennia. And now you want to restrict those people from coming over to what used to be their land. And it's no accident that Latinos are thriving in this environment, that we're having kids at a larger age, because nature always figures out a way to put things back together, and we're seeing that happen now. But I do get mixed feelings. I get mixed feelings when I go to the Alamo, even though I think it's a wonderful historic place. I get mixed feelings when I see Mexicans, being shown in like tattered rag, and people stabbing Mexicans in the eye, and like standing in grandeur. Like, and when you go to the Texas Capitol, they have these huge paintings of like the wars that have occurred here, and people are like on the floor, like on their knees, and that's you would say, if that's exactly how it happened, then maybe we would give it a pass. But in doing your own research and looking at things happen, in reading the other side, you realize that both sides aggrandize things, and both sides want to tell the history the way they saw it, when in reality we have to take both and come up with our own conclusions in the middle. But sometimes people won't do that. People will in fact say, like Chingo will say, but I can hear him saying, you just hate America. You hate like America first, and it's all of that, when in reality, I love America so much that I want to make it better.
Exactly.
So we can all live more freely.
All right, and going back to that, what issues do you think Latinos, Houstonians, Texans should focus on?
I think we should focus on the issues that are going to be the urgent issues. A lot of people, when they hear Latino, they automatically think immigration, and as contradictory as this may sound, I wouldn't want us as a Latino community. I wouldn't want us to focus on immigration. I think that as Latinos living here in the state of Texas, we should focus on healthcare first. A lot of people are dying of diabetes and fatty liver and all the things. And when people try to live a more healthier lifestyle, or maybe want to do a salad once in a while. Hey, es creído, yeah. Hey, why you trying to lose weight? Hey, like no, no, comete esto, mijo, and like there's a lot of cultural and societal pressures that go into people trying to live healthier lifestyles. The second would be education, and I'm not talking about education just at the school. I'm talking about education at home. I'm talking about getting rid of these patriarchal systems that say that women are in charge of taking the kids to school. They're in charge of all the school things. Like no. It takes two to tango. There took two people to make that child. Men should step up to the plate and play the same role in going to the parent-teacher conferences, in trying to make the parent-teacher meetings, in trying to be involved in the PTO, in trying to keep up. It's sad when you see some of these guys that they're like, oh, I'm working, I don't have time for school. And then you're like, where does your kid go to school? And they're like, oh, I don't know. And how old is your kid? Oh, I don't know. What grade is he in? I don't know. Like, how disconnected must you be?
I've seen that a lot.
And the same thing, it's going to take all of us to change things and to push things into a better thing. And there's nothing unmanly about doing any of this. In fact, you're taking responsibility for your own future, for your own future. Because this kid, if he makes it to college, guess what? He's going to have a better job. Guess what? He's going to be able to take better care of both of y'all when you guys get old.
And when you're actually involved in the kid's life, you actually discipline him, because that's another issue. Like, the parents are always working, and they take so much pride in the work, but your kid is pretty much growing up on the streets.
And then that's when we run into gangs and teen pregnancies, and et cetera, et cetera. The third thing that I think Latinos should focus on is the housing and how we are continuing to build our neighborhoods. There's a lot of people that get taken advantage of. There's a lot of people that don't know their rights, that sell off their properties, when in reality there could be so much more done, and there could be a beneficial gain to them, as in terms of them keeping their houses and making those investments so that they can have generational wealth for their children. And finally, I think that our community, one of the biggest advices that I got that really stuck with me as a young man when I was 17 years old is a woman from El Salvador that told me, the problem with Latinos is we know how to play our game. And I asked her, what's our game? Our game is to work hard, to be good, to fly under the radar, and to make it to an old age and have our kids take care of us. That's our game. But we need to learn to play their game. We need to learn to play this game. Whereas investments and 401ks and college and getting people, creating those generational wealth so that our kids, when we get to be that old age, our kids don't have to worry so much about taking care of us, but building their generational wealth for their kids. And those are the things we have to do. I see so many business people. Let's talk about yarderos, the people that mow the lawns, that they have successful businesses, but they start aging, and what happens? Their businesses crumble when they are no longer out there with the lawnmowers. But what if we could tell that person, we're going to help you build a business model to where you can handle the operation from a table like this in an air conditioner office, and you could still be successful, but with the tools to grow your company, so you don't have to mow lawns the rest of your life. You can still do what you're passionate about. You can still do what you know. You can still train people to do as good of a job as you do, but you can do it from the comfort of your own home or your own office instead of having to be out there.
And I think that's very powerful, especially for the southeast side, where a lot of people they do contract work. They'll go work for Halliburton, they'll go work for SMB, they'll go work for Russ, and they gotta work 90 days before they even qualify for health insurance. By then, their shutdown ends because they work shutdowns. So they never have insurance. They're constantly working 2 months, 7/12s, working themselves to death, but they're not insured. And I think that's a huge problem. I'm glad you mentioned that about the health insurance and everything, because they got to look at themselves as a business, especially if you have a craft like a pipe fitter or a welder. You got to look at yourself as a business and get yourself insurance. So I think that's very powerful. Before I end this, I did want to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the police brutality. To me, I took it very personal, the whole John Hernandez case. You know, for people who don't know, he's a man that was choked to death outside of a Denny's. It was a police officer's husband, a sheriff's officer's husband who choked him to death, and she held him down as well. I took a lot of offense for the fact that she didn't get convicted. I just want to know what your thoughts are on why she did not get convicted if she was an accomplice to the murder.
I think that, well, I mean, number one, I'm really, and I'm glad you bring this up because I think more attention needs to be put onto this case as to explain why it rolled out the way it did and when and where it went. And I think one of the important things to point out is that John's family suffered immensely, not only from the initial loss of their son, but also through a mistrial and then a second trial. And I think at the end of the day, they were also tired, and they were, and with good reason. I mean, if you've ever been to a murder trial, it's brutal. We got to see John's body in the autopsy. I mean, things that you never want to see, right? And I think that took a real big toll on them. The problem with Shauna, with Mr. Thompson's wife, was that the laws and the way that penal code is written in Texas and the United States, you have to put beyond a reasonable doubt. So if there's any doubt in what happened, then they're not going to be convicted. And I think the state believed that they didn't have enough reasonable doubt or enough cause to they had enough cause to charge her, but not enough cause to find her guilty. And that's where the decision was made. If they go to another trial and have to review all these things again, and then it could take years for them to get up to that point. The reality, though, is that at the end of the day, there was when you have corrupt policing themselves, there's a lot of lying and a lot of things that go into that, and that's where the color of law. If people are acting on their color of law, meaning that if people are acting by the protection by the superpower that they're given, they sometimes, it's in their human nature to sometimes abuse it. So they will file false reports, they will do this, they will intimidate witnesses. And let's just take, for example, John's wife. She was put in the back of a squad car for 9 hours in the rain, not without any information as to what had happened to her husband, as to where her husband was. She kept asking. There's video of her asking. There's video of her crying, sobbing in the back of the car, and they just kept her there because they wanted to get their story straight before she did. And so I think that it's such a complex. It was such a complex case. It was such a complex situation that it's really difficult to understand. The other part of it, though, is the way that law is written and the way that courts carry themselves. It's difficult to get a person convicted in the state of Texas because the laws were not written to favor us. The laws were written to favor white landowning men during times of segregation, where they could lynch somebody and then be cleared of all charges if there was not a beyond a reasonable doubt in there. So it's hard to talk about these things. These are hard concepts to grasp sometimes, but it's important that we talk about them openly so that people know that there's not just one person responsible for this or the other. A lot of people want to say now that oh, these judges from this party are letting people off with like a slap on the wrist and this and that. But when you take a deep dive and look into the statutes that they have, or like what are they, for example, for a simple murder case, the maximum fine or the maximum bail that you can get is $1 million. 10% of that is $100,000. When there's bonds company that are fighting for 3 or 4%, that's $30,000. I mean, it's nothing if you just murdered somebody, right?
Yeah.
But if they try to hold people without bail, then you as a defendant can sue the state for an unreasonable punishment, because the U.S. Constitution supersedes the Texas Constitution. So these things are not things that we can just, people, same thing, like to throw out talking points and say these Democratic judges or these types of judges that are just letting people out into the street, without realizing that there's so much complexity, even in the way that cases are handled, even in the way that money is managed, that we can't keep track of people 24/7. It's an incredibly corrupt and an incredibly complex system, which people have dedicated. Stop.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. It's a really complicated and corrupt system that people have really devoted their whole lives into, and we're still not going to be able to clear it up. So what the best thing to do is to inform people and to sit down with people and set clear expectations as to what we can do, while at the same time advocating for policies to change, for things to change. During the John Hernandez case,